Hey out there, Akronites. Welcome once again to Around Akron with Blue Green. This episode's all about rock and roll in the city of Akron, the rubber city of Akron. We're here on Main Street in front of the Canal Park Stadium, what used to be the home of the bank. And if you know about the bank, you already know all about the Akron Sound. On this episode, I get to sit down and talk to members of the Bizarros. I head over to downtown Akron to talk to Chris Butler in his studio. I'm also going to head over to the center and talk with Tracy Thomas. Now to kick this show off, I'm going to head over and talk to the Bad Dudes, whose members played with Hammer Damage, the Dead Boys, and they even got to jam with Tesla. Let's go see what these guys are all about.
Well, back in Hammer Damage's heyday, the two big clubs were JB's and the Bank in Akron. And JB's was a real dive. It used to get just packed though. And our manager, Dale Maycheck, actually used to give us salt tablets before we played so we wouldn't faint because it got that hot down there. The Bank had its own peculiarities. It was huge inside, so the owner hung this big parachute from the ceiling to try to tame the echoes and so on. And I discovered the only way to play and have it sound okay was not to actually listen to the drummer, but to listen to the reflection of the snare drum off the back wall. And then it would be in time. So it was challenging, but it was fun.
There was a few other clubs in between too. The nightclub that used to be Ramones had original music for a while, but most of them didn't last that long at all. So JB's and the Bank were the staples, and like I said earlier, everybody was fighting to play at those two clubs. So, and there was only 3 or 4 original bands here at that time. So where now there's tons and tons of bands, tons and tons of clubs. So back then we all fought to get that gig. So we weren't all really good buddies back then because we were all in competition to get that Friday or Saturday night. You know, most of the shows were on weeknights, Tuesdays, Thursdays. You know, Hammer Damage actually played Thursday, Friday, Saturday for about a year at JB's. There was a few year period to where record companies were kind of coming here when Devo, Dead Boys, you know, that Chai Pig, those kind of bands. And for about a year or so, it was kind of like the hotbed. They called it the New Liverpool of, you know, Akron was a New Liverpool, whatnot. The same as kind of happened in Seattle and, you know, Austin and some of those other places. I don't think it ever left, but there's, you know, the scene was harder back then because there were less places to play. Now there's a lot more places to play. Not better pay, but good, a lot of choices to play at. Where back then you were lucky to have 2-3 clubs that would let you play if you played original music. So,
but there's also kind of a decline in the number of people that go to hear bands, I think.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is you know, the drunk driving laws. People just don't go to clubs and party the way they used to. It's, you know, who wants to get a DUI? So that's kind of affected, I think, the club scene a bit. But there are more clubs. There are some clubs around that are really nice to bands now. That wasn't always the case.
right.
So it's, and I don't get out that much, so I don't really have a sense of what all is happening in Akron these days. It's my impression that there are quite a few bands.
Seems to be quite a few more now than ever, especially if you look at like during the summer for like porch rock or things like that go on. There's like 100 bands, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I'd never heard of these guys, you know. So there's a lot of music going on here right now. I think it's a good thing, very good.
For me, I always did it for myself. It was kind of like the reward at the end of the day so that I could play whatever I wanted to. It was never a job for me. And I think that's what's kind of kept me interested in it for basically my whole life. Never tried to make a living at it, really. And some good things happened along the way, but I think that was just because of timing and luck and the fact that I love doing it so much. You know, not that I planned it that way. So.
Yeah, don't get in it to be a rock star necessarily, because that's far. You better off playing the lottery. You know. I'd like to thank Nick Nicholas for being there for all the Akron bands. He really got a lot of people's music out there with Clone Records in the 70s, and including Ken Huey and Eva Rachel Sweet, all the bands from the late 70s, and he owned Clone Records, which our record is on, and we're proud of that. So I'd like to thank Nick.
And just thanks to everyone who's ever come and supported us over the years. It's made our lives enormously better, and it's been wonderful to have, in some cases, the same people that used to come 40 years ago
Still coming.
are still coming. So
And they're walkers and canes.
that kind of support is just tremendous, and we're hugely grateful for it.
I'm here on the sidewalk in front of the Canal Park Stadium, where people once lined up to get into bank to see Tracy Thomas and Unit 5 play. Let's go see what Tracy Thomas is all about.
I think it's an energy. I think something happened on this land, in these trees, in these walls, where somebody started it, and it kept going and repeating, and just the energy of a place that creates like that drew in more and more and more energy of like-minded people, artists, musicians, you know, most definitely. And it's kind of like attracts like, but I do believe there's some kind of an energy in this area that feeds that. Tin Huey became huge out of Akron, out of the gate. Warner Brothers Records, one of still, I mean, that Contents Dislodged album is, I still listen to it all the time. We idolized them. And we were asked to open their homecoming Welcome Back Akron show at the bank. So when we got there was a few people scattered about. We knew that it was sold out, but apparently the bank had allowed way more people in. And when I say capacity, I mean off people leaning over the railing on the balcony and all the way up to the stage on the floor and on the sides in the bar, but we didn't know it. And so they announced us, and in those days we thought we were all hip, and we wore little matching police uniforms, except mine was a skirt. So we come out of the dressing room and we start walking in our little matching outfits into single file line, and it dawned on us, oh my God, this is ridiculous. We had to like kind of wind through the people, and it was one of those slow things where it was like they started and then it was like it just kept building and building, and they screamed, and by the time we got to the stage they were nutty. I mean, the people were just welcomed us with open arms, and I remember turning around and looking at Bob Bethington, my drummer, and just going, what is this? It was the most amazing night, and I just really thought, yeah, this is me. This is what I want to do. This is that warm, fuzzy feeling, and I kind of wish I'd had more to remember it by, you know, more video and more photos and things that I just didn't even think about, because it was really a special moment. That was when I felt like I got this. I knew, and my guys in the band knew, we were onto something. I mean, you could feel it, and we knew we were onto something, but having had no prior experience, I just thought that's what it was like when you were in a band. I mean, you start your band and people come, and they come out of the woodwork and they support you, and this is really fun. I didn't know there was another side. I didn't know that there was people out there who had 4 people a night or whose thing wasn't happening for them. I was a little lucky out of the gate, I think. Because certainly now, like, I played 3 nights ago to maybe 25 people. So now I get the dynamics of it, but at the time we just thought that's how it was. And then when it wasn't, it was a real reality check. One blow, we got our first blow. The album didn't turn out exactly how we wanted, and I don't even think it was anybody's fault. There was a certain, and I have heard this over the years, and my husband, Scott, who owns Time Traveler, he nailed it. He said there was something about Unit 5 Live that was just magical, and for whatever reason, failed to connect on vinyl. At the time, there were no CDs. So we didn't translate from what we did and what generated all the excitement live onto the record. And so when we got that first blow where we didn't get picked up, we thought, well, we're done. That's what you do. We didn't make it. We're done now. And we quit. And I remember the day we quit. It was at Bob Ethington's apartment on Mole Avenue. I cried. I think some of the guys even cried. It was awful. And nobody ever reined us in and said, just take a hiatus and come back and record these new songs, because we had a batch of new songs that were wonderful. And we didn't. I have turned my attention to the jazz, and that's where my heart is now. I love those old songs, and I love the freeness of it, and working with Tim Longfellow. I think everybody around here knows Tim Longfellow, or the full band. And my full band includes Bob Ethington from Unit 5. I think the jazz thing is it for me as an aging lady, and I think you can age gracefully in that. And I mean, I see people like Chrissie Hynde gets out there, and to me, she still looks as cool as she ever looked. I get up there, and because I don't believe it in my head, I'm not pulling it off. So I'm just like, who's the old chick with the guitar? So it's the jazz thing for me. You know, they rolled Etta James out in her wheelchair. Like the year before she died, she kept going and going and going. And there's something about jazz that it doesn't put the boundaries on people that other types of music do.
What a thrill it must have been to be a rock star waiting to play at the Bank, which once stood here on Main Street. Bands like the Waitresses, Tin Huey, Rubber City Rebels, and the Bizarros had the privilege of playing there. Next up, I sit down with the Bizarros and see what those guys are all about.
Bizarros? You're a comic book fan? It was taken on I read a great definition: the mutated clone of Superman. And they did everything backwards.
Bizarro world.
Yeah, they lived on a square planet, and they spoke, backwards. And
If you were going somewhere, you said hello, and if you were leaving,
goodbye.
yeah, goodbye. And when you're the opposite.
They were the imperfect clones of Superman. They had cracked faces. And, yeah. Anyway,
We all read comic books, so basically he came up. Or actually, our first name was called Eyes, E-Y-E-S, but then we saw another band had that name at the time, so we changed it to the Bizarros. But I think we were Eyes for a while.
Yeah, very short, but yeah. I never thought of myself as a musician of any type. And then there was so much crappy music around the time of the disco era that was, shoved down our throats, our ears, on the radio, and on TV, and the media. And there were a lot of young kids around the country that were forming their own bands. I was reading about this. At that time, they didn't call it the new wave, but it was this emerging wave of young bands that wanted to go back to what rock and roll was all about, just simple and stuff that your parents hated. So, one day I thought, man, I could do this. We could do this at a New Year's Eve party, 1976. I talked to my best friends, Don and his brother Jerry and Terry Walker, who just recently was deceased. And let's get a band together. Let's put a band together and let's write our own songs and do our own music. And it happened. Within days, we were there practicing in the basement.
We started writing our own songs, and actually everything just started coming together at the time we were doing it. And the Rubber City Rebels and Bizarros and
Devo
was there, and
there were a lot of bands doing what we were doing, but we're all different. And that without plugging something, that book that's out now, the Akron Sound, that basically explains everything. And
pretty much.
Well, we had to do it. Nobody else is doing it.
We weren't going to go right to a record label, so we were doing like everybody else, make our own records.
Yeah.
He backed it all with, and made them. So.
Yeah, when
and a lot of bands from the area that was on Clone too. So.
Yeah, Clone was a label that I founded, sole purpose just to get the Bizarros heard and noticed, and easy to mail a record to someone instead of performing. And then I thought, hey, let's do it. I'm going to become a big shot, like a David Geffen of Akron, have my own label, and also promote what we had here, which thought was gold, the stuff, the talent that we had here. We did it that way with the record, the actual physical record you could hold in your hand. Chris Butler did it with a fanzine that he published in Kent.
Plus, we used the studio, Mark Price's basement.
Yeah, that's right. We had a local studio.
I mean, everybody did something and contributed all the way around.
And the Rubber City Rebels had the club, a place called the Crypt, that you could play. Old rubber workers hangout, that turned out to be run by a bunch of punk kids. That we had our own label, we had our own fanzine, and we had our club to play at.
Then the bank after it closed.
Yeah, so it was always a lot of. Anyway, DIY was out of necessity here.
Yep.
We didn't have a lot of clubs. People came to interview us. Like Bob Christgau came from New York to interview, document this, in the Village Voice. Executives from record labels came here to hear what was going on about the so-called buzz about Akron. And we created something, but we're in the midst of it while we're doing all this, so we didn't really, all we wanted to do was spread the word, get out there.
And it kind of worked because all of a sudden a lot of bands from Akron were being signed, so it just built and built. And
it was a flash, but we didn't, at the time we were experiencing it, it was like...
it was fun.
Yeah, it was just a great experience what we were living in. We had these harsh winters in Akron, and 3 TV channels in the old days, and stayed in a lot. And we were lucky enough to have 2 things going on as far as media is concerned. One was we had Goulardi, and we all, he was, for 2 or 3 years that he was around, he inspired us. We're weird because of Goulardi. He was our, another father figure to us. And then we had underground radio, which we had, WMMS was, in those days, was really experimental. And I don't think a lot of parts of the country didn't have that.
Because a lot of that broke here in this area, really, through Cleveland.
So I think we were indoors a lot because of the weather. We had Goulardi on Friday nights, Saturday afternoons, and the radio once we got older.
Now, to wrap this show up, and on a special note, this is the 100th story told on Around Akron with Blue Green. And for the 100th story, I have the pleasure of sitting down and talking with Chris Butler, formerly of bands like The Numbers Band, Tin Huey, The Waitresses, and most recently, Half Cleveland. Let's go see what Chris Butler is all about.
You know, most people my age go, oh my God, I saw Elvis on Ed Sullivan, which I did. Or I heard something on the radio that absolutely knocked me out, which I did. I was playing like folk guitar because it was a folk revival. You know, Michael rowed the boat ashore. Hallelujah. And then there was a clip on the TV show called Shindig of The Who in London, and I absolutely was, all the cells in my body changed, and that was my downfall, and it's all The Who's fault, and if I ever meet Pete Townsend, I'm going to tell him it's his fault. What is the Akron sound? Nothing that you can really point out as defining and covers everybody. There's too much diversity here. What I hear is people wanting to be heard. What I hear is a stubbornness and a desire to matter. What I hear is being true to yourself. With minimum commercial expectations. If the assumption is that you know you're not going to get a huge record deal, with plenty of exceptions, you know, Black Keys are a really good example because they had a unique sound and they worked their heinies off. I know the manager who was the Waitresses manager, Cliff Bernstein. Cliff said, you know, I really didn't hear it, but boy, they worked. And if they achieved something, they pretty much did it by blood, sweat, and tears. I think the Akron sound is blood, sweat, and tears. I think there is a ferocious work ethic to be here. And I think that comes across on whatever genre you're playing. There's room here to be an individual without dire consequences. If you take away templates and I've got to do this in order to get signed or be popular or whatever, there's a fierce desire to be who you are in whatever genre you like. And I can't say that's unique, but I you know, to other areas in the country or the world. But I think that is specific here. There are great individual sounding bands here. And I think they all share a real fierce desire to be heard. I was the huge booster for all things local when I was at Kenton and in Akron. I started a fanzine specifically to you know, trumpet the good stuff that was going on. Akron was the I don't know, poor cousin to Cleveland. You couldn't get in the Cleveland scene. You couldn't get on WMMS. If you were a local band, or you know, maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, on Sunday, they do a local music show. I wanted to trumpet the local area. Robert Christgau from the Village Voice wrote an article when he went to London. You know, said this is it. This is the greatest scene. And I wrote him a letter and said, nah, yeah, it's great. Well, we have a thing going on here in Akron and Kent. You should come out and, you know, write up, because there's great stuff going on here. And he did come. I'm not saying that to blow my own horn. I'm trying to say that there was something and is something special. We're very fortunate to be where we are, because there really is great stuff going on in this pocket of the world. One of my favorite pieces of gear up here is a tape machine, tape delay that is broken. The motor is, if it isn't dead yet, it's certainly going to die the next time I use it. And it speeds up and slows down. So a signal goes in, instead of a nice, beautiful echo, it comes back all wobbly and screwed up. So instead of a nice, sweet, reverb sound, it's this weird wobulation going on. I love stuff like that. I love confounding expectations. How's that? Of what things should sound like. And I'm not that outside. I'm still pretty much, too straight for the weirdos and too weird for the straights. But I've never made it all the way over to full weirdo. I'm trying. One of these days I will be full weirdo, I promise.
Thank you once again for watching this episode of Around Akron with Blue Green. Now, if you have any questions or comments, you can reach me on email by going to the website at www.aroundakronwithbluegreen.com, or you can drop me a message on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Thank you, and have an amazing day.